Hello, this is Pretty Guardian, and today we are going to be talking about the game Marvel's Midnight Suns. This one was made by Firaxis Studios, and I had been seeing a lot of their games, mainly from the XCOM series, out on Steam and different platforms, and I always thought they looked so good. But I was worried about what the gameplay would be like because I'm not super into shooter type games. But they've brought a similar formula over to the Marvel world with this Midnight Suns game. And they've done a wonderful job with it. The graphics look great and the combat is pretty engaging for me. There's a variety of different moves that you can make, whether that's like moving your heroes around on the map or shoving enemies or making different type of attacks, including synergizing attacks with your other teammates. And overall, that's been a lot of fun. So the basic story of this game, your character is the Hunter. And 300 years prior to this game, you had been fighting a battle against your mother, Lilith. And you are basically the hero that's prophesied to defeat her. So a group of heroes from the modern times, Nico, Doctor Strange, some other ones get together to resurrect you and bring you back to fight Lilith before she can herald in the arrival of Chthon, which would spell the end for mankind. One of the things that I think is a lot of fun about this game is that it has a huge roster of different heroes that you can interact with and also take into battle with you. So you have some fan favorites like Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America, but then there's also some lesser known heroes that are in the roster, like Magic or Robbie Reyes's version of Ghost Rider. Of course, you got my girl Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, in there, which I am so happy about. The gameplay loop is kind of divided up into two segments. So your primary base is a location called the Abbey that's being held in a secret pocket dimension that Magic creates portals to help you get between this pocket dimension and the real world. So while you're at the Abbey, you can focus on training and upgrading your abilities, as well as just exploring and also leveling up your relationships with your teammates. So you get to know each of these characters really intimately. There's a lot of aspects of them that are pulled from comic books and different media, so they'll be familiar, but also they're going to be a little bit different because they are being adapted into this new game. I really hated the number of loading screens that I had to go through. That was definitely something that pulled me out of the game. And it wasn't just the number of loading screens, it was also the length of the loading screens. Sometimes it felt like I'd be sitting there for minutes in between doing activities in the Abbey and then jumping into battle. And so then inevitably when these long breaks would happen, I would go and check my phone. I would go and get dinner started. I would start doing other things. And then I would literally come back to the game and be like, okay, well, do I even want to play at this point? And of course I do. And that's why I had put so much time into this game. But it was definitely a slog from that perspective. If you are a new player picking up this game, I wanted to give you a few tips. So for tip number 1, when you are in those combat phases, make sure to use up all of your moves that you can possibly make. As much as possible, as much as what's reasonable and called for in that combat. But the way combat usually breaks down is it's ultimately a matter of turn economy. So if you are pushing enemies where they need to be pushed, if you're using as many cards and abilities as you can, and then you're using your environment interactions and just kind of maximizing the turns that you're taking, then you're going to come out so far ahead compared to if you were wasting them. With strategizing for combat, the second piece of advice that I want to give is to think about how the cards between your different teammates can synergize. For example, Blade can inflict bleeding on enemies. And in this, bleed is a status ailment where the enemy will lose health each turn. But we also have Morbius, who can inflict more damage to the enemies based on their bleed. So sometimes pairing these two can be beneficial. And there's actually a lot of different pairings and synergies that can happen between different movesets. So it's just something worth paying attention to. And then the third tip that I wanted to give is don't be afraid to actually hang out and interact with the heroes back at the Abbey. I know some people might think that those interactions can be a little bit boring. For me, I really enjoyed getting to talk intimately with the different heroes. One example is Blade. I remember like watching the movies with Wesley Snipes back in the day, and we always knew that Blade was badass. But one of the funny, kind of interesting scenes in the game is that you get to have a book club with Blade. And so you see this like serious, thoughtful, disciplined version of him as well. I will tell you that this game has turned me into a huge Blade fan. So I'm very excited to follow that character moving forward. But the other thing with these interactions is that it can unlock new and legendary abilities. So it's worth maxing them out. If they're a character that you're interested in, definitely talk to them. To talk just a little bit more about the mechanics, during combat, it is turn-based, and you'll be fighting a variety of enemies from Hydra to the demons of Lilith. You will draw a set of cards, and those cards kind of determine what abilities your character can use. Outside of the matches, you are able to customize them. So if you get new cards, you can kind of build your deck a little bit. And there's also mechanics for upgrading the cards, which is definitely something you're going to want to do, or these enemies are going to start running laps around your champions. Thinking back on the game itself, I had a really wonderful time. I enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it for gamers and Marvel fans. I think that it has a lot to offer. The biggest things that I didn't like were the loading screens, and I did have some issues with the game crashing on me. So I would definitely say to be cautious. I played it on Xbox. I feel like a high-end PC could probably run it pretty easily. I don't think the bugs are bad enough that I wouldn't recommend this game, but I think you just have to know that you're not going to get a perfectly polished gem with this one. I spent around 75 hours completing the main storyline. Between each of the story missions, it's usually good to run a couple of the side missions that are available, because that's going to help you get the resources that you need to continue upgrading your heroes and their abilities. Then getting back into those story missions, it was always fun to watch the action scenes and the different sequences with all of our different champions that we love. I also really like how they handled the story. For me, Midnight Suns isn't just about the superhero component, but this is kind of the witchier, more mystical side of the Marvel universe. And so I liked some of the enemies and the characters that they pulled in for that. And even bringing in characters like X-Men's Storm and having there be some commentary about her mystical powers as well. I thought that that was really cool. Obviously, the Scarlet Witch is going to be a main component to the storytelling that's happening here. And even Doctor Strange kind of comments on her powers. In this version, he was her mystical teacher for a little while. So they did a good job of incorporating those more magical elements of the Marvel universe. And this is just a fun game that I would definitely recommend. So that was my review of Marvel's Midnight Suns. If you liked it, do all of those wonderful things, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know who your favorite Marvel superhero is. And until next time, beware the Scarlet Witch.